Conflict shows up in every relationship, at work, at home, and especially with the people we love most. The mistake we make is thinking conflict is the problem. Conflict isn't the problem. The real problem is how we handle it. Most of us, when conflict comes up, get defensive. We raise our voices, we interrupt, we fight to win. And when you're fighting to win, you've already lost. Because the point of conflict is not about proving who's right, it's about proving that the relationship matters more than the disagreement. So how do we do that? How do we take something sharp and heated and turn it into something that builds connection? First, we pause. Just one breath, one beat before reacting. That pause gives you the space to choose your response instead of firing back. When you slow down, you lower the temperature, and that alone can change the whole conversation. Second, we listen. Not the kind of listening where you're just waiting for your turn to speak. Real listening, eye contact, no phone in your hand, nodding to show you heard them. Because when people feel heard, they soften. Most of the time, they weren't looking for a solution. They were looking for understanding. Third, we reframe. Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," say, "I feel unheard when we talk about this." Instead of, "You always do this," try, "When that happens, it makes me feel." That little shift takes the blame out and puts the focus on connection. It's not about attacking, it's about sharing. And finally, we choose peace over pride. Sometimes you don't have to have the last word. Sometimes letting it go is stronger than proving your point. Because peace doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to protect the relationship over the argument. Conflict, handled right, is not a wall. It's a bridge. It's the place where two people can learn, grow, and understand each other more deeply. Connection doesn't come from always agreeing. It comes from learning how to disagree without disconnecting. Pause before reacting to lower the temperature. In the heat of conflict, the natural instinct is to defend yourself immediately. Words fly out quickly, and once they're spoken, you can't take them back. That's when conversations escalate into arguments, and arguments turn into full-blown battles. The power of the pause is that it interrupts this cycle. Just one breath, one moment of silence, creates space between the trigger and your response. That space is where self-control lives, and without it, conflict almost always runs away from us. When someone says something that feels sharp, disrespectful, or unfair, your body reacts first. Your chest tightens, your heart rate spikes, and your mind races with comebacks. That is your fight or flight response kicking in. And if you let that response drive, you'll likely say something that raises the conflict instead of lowering it. But when you pause even for a single deep breath, you're giving your brain time to catch up with your emotions. You're moving from reacting to responding. That shift is small, but it's powerful. The pause doesn't have to be long. Sometimes it's 3 seconds of silence. Sometimes it's saying, "Give me a moment to think about that." Sometimes it's literally drinking a sip of water before speaking. What matters is that you take control of your pace, because when conflict speeds up, it becomes a race to be heard. When you slow it down, you bring clarity, and clarity always lowers the temperature. Think of it like a thermostat. If both people are heating up, the conversation gets hotter and hotter until it boils over. The pause is like turning the dial back down. It cools the room, giving everyone a chance to breathe. And often, once the room is cooler, the other person mirrors you. They see you're not coming in swinging, and their defenses start to drop too. Conflict isn't just about what you say, it's about the energy you bring into the room. Pausing changes that energy. The pause also communicates respect. It says, "I'm considering my words because this conversation matters." Instead of blurting out something hurtful, you're showing that you value the relationship enough to think before you speak. That simple act builds trust, even in disagreement. People notice when you're not just waiting to fire back, but are actually slowing yourself down to respond thoughtfully. It's important to remember that pausing isn't weakness. Some think silence means they're losing ground or letting the other person win. In reality, silence is strength. It shows that you're not ruled by impulse. You're choosing to lead the conversation instead of letting the conflict lead you. The person who can pause is the person who has control, and the one with control sets the tone for the entire interaction. Practicing the pause takes effort. The first few times, you might catch yourself too late, realizing you've already reacted. That's okay. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Start small. In everyday conversations, pause before answering a question. Pause when someone interrupts you. Pause when you're tempted to jump in. You'll notice that this simple habit makes your communication clearer and calmer, even outside of conflict. Then, when the high-stakes moments come, you'll already have the muscle built. Another benefit of pausing is that it gives you time to listen. When you're not rushing to reply, you're actually able to hear what the other person is saying. Sometimes conflict isn't really about the surface issue at all. It's about the feeling underneath. But if you rush to defend, you'll miss it. Pausing gives space for the deeper meaning to come through. And once you see that, you're no longer fighting over words, you're connecting over understanding. Conflict doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the strongest move is the quietest one. The pause isn't empty space, it's filled with intention, filled with choice. It's the moment you decide whether to add fuel to the fire or water to the flame. Listen to understand, not to reply. Most people think they are good listeners, but in reality, they are only listening to gather ammunition for their next point. They nod, they wait, but the whole time their mind is racing, preparing what to say next. That isn't listening, that's rehearsing. And when you rehearse instead of listening, the other person feels it. They know you're not truly present with them, and that lack of presence is what keeps conflict alive. True listening isn't about waiting your turn. It's about setting aside the urge to reply and focusing entirely on understanding what the other person is trying to say. When you listen this way, you take the spotlight off yourself. Instead of thinking, how do I defend myself? Or how do I win this argument? You shift to, what are they really trying to tell me? That change alone can calm a storm. Because at the heart of most conflicts, people don't actually want to win, they want to be heard. They want to know that what they feel matters to someone else. When you provide that by listening, you often resolve half the conflict before any solutions are even discussed. Listening to understand means paying attention with your whole body. It's not just hearing words, it's noticing tone, expression, posture. It's leaning in, making eye contact, and showing through your presence that you're engaged. Small cues like nodding, staying quiet until they finish, or saying, I hear you, communicate that you're not rushing them. You're giving them room to get it all out. And sometimes that's all they need. There's also a deeper layer. Listening to understand means you're not just focused on the words, but on the meaning underneath them. If someone says, you never listen to me, the surface level is an accusation, but the meaning underneath is a plea. I feel invisible, and I need to matter to you. When you listen with the goal of understanding, you pick up on that deeper message. You're not fighting the words. They might be clumsy, angry, or unfair. You're tuning into the feeling. That's where connection is built. One of the most powerful things you can do in conflict is to repeat back what you heard in your own words, not as a parrot, but as proof that you understood. For example, so what you're saying is, when I interrupt you, it makes you feel dismissed, right? That simple reflection does two things. It shows you were listening, and it gives them a chance to clarify if you missed the point. This keeps the conversation from spiraling into more misunderstandings, because often it's not the issue itself that keeps people fighting. It's the feeling of not being understood. Listening in this way also takes humility. It means quieting the urge to be right and putting connection above your ego. When you choose to really hear someone out, you're not agreeing with everything they say, you're just respecting their perspective. That respect alone is powerful. It disarms defensiveness, and often the other person will start to mirror your listening, softening their tone and actually becoming willing to hear you too. Of course, this isn't easy when emotions run high. Your instinct is to interrupt, to set the record straight, to make sure your side is heard. But if you fight that instinct and instead lean into listening, you shift the whole energy. Sometimes you'll even discover that what you thought they meant isn't what they meant at all. How many arguments could be avoided if we actually pause to clarify before jumping in? Most of them. Listening to understand is not about losing your voice in the conversation. It's about timing. You will have your chance to speak, but if you rush, you miss the chance to connect. And when you connect first, your words land more softly. They're received instead of rejected. Listening is the groundwork for every resolution, because no solution will matter until the other person feels that you truly understand what they're saying. Reframe blame into, I feel, statements. In conflict, the words you choose can either escalate the tension or ease it. Most of us default to blame when we're hurt. We say things like, you always ignore me, or you never care about what I want. Those kinds of sentences come out fast, sharp, and heavy. But the problem with blame is that it instantly puts the other person on defense. The moment they feel accused, their energy shifts from listening to protecting themselves. And when someone is defending, they're no longer open. The conversation shuts down before it even has the chance to build connection. Reframing blame into "I feel" statements changes that dynamic completely. Instead of throwing accusations, you're sharing your own experience. You're saying, "This is what's happening inside me." For example, instead of "You never listen to me," you could say, "I feel unheard when I'm talking and I don't get a response." The first statement attacks, the second opens a door. The focus moves from what they did wrong to how you're experiencing the moment, and people are more likely to respond with empathy to a feeling than to a criticism. This shift matters because conflict is rarely about who's technically right or wrong. It's almost always about emotions that aren't being expressed clearly. Anger, sadness, frustration. These emotions leak out as blame when what we really want is connection. I feel statements are tools for translating those emotions into something the other person can actually understand without being pushed away. They soften the edges of hard truths, making them easier to hear. It's worth noting that I feel statements aren't about manipulation. They're not tricks to get your way. They're honest reflections of your inner experience. And when you use them, you give the other person insight they might not have had before. You let them see the impact of their actions without making them the villain. That difference changes the entire tone of a conflict. For example, think of a partner who comes home late without calling. Saying, "You don't care about me," attacks their character. But saying, "I feel unimportant when you don't let me know you'll be late," gives them something to work with. The first creates defensiveness, the second invites responsibility. The same truth is being expressed, but one approach pushes away while the other draws closer. It's also important how you deliver these statements. The words, "I feel," are not magic on their own. If you say, "I feel like you're a terrible partner," that's still blame dressed up in disguise. True, "I feel" statements focus on your emotions, not on judging the other person. They use words like hurt, confused, overlooked, frustrated, loved, appreciated. They anchor the conversation in your perspective instead of making sweeping claims about who the other person is. Another benefit of this approach is that it models vulnerability. It takes more courage to say, "I feel hurt," than to say, "You hurt me." The first reveals your inner world, the second builds a wall. And when you show vulnerability, you give permission for the other person to be vulnerable too. That exchange of openness is what turns conflict into connection. Reframing blame also slows the pace of the conversation. It makes you stop and check in with yourself before speaking. You ask, "What am I really feeling right now? What's the emotion underneath my words?" That moment of reflection can prevent you from saying something impulsive you'll regret later. It also helps you stay focused on the real issue instead of spiraling into a list of accusations. When you consistently practice this shift, people notice the difference. They feel safer talking to you because they don't expect to be attacked. They feel respected even when you disagree. And in return, they are more likely to share honestly with you. That's how trust is built. Not through perfect agreement, but through conversations where both people can speak their truth without fear of being blamed. Choose peace over pride to protect the relationship. In conflict, the temptation to defend your pride is strong. You want to be right, you want your side heard, and you want to prove your point. Pride whispers, "Don't back down." And if you give in, you've lost. But relationships aren't won or lost like battles. They're lived day by day, built choice by choice. And in those choices, peace often holds more value than pride ever could. Protecting the relationship doesn't mean you're surrendering. It means you're choosing what matters more. Pride in conflict looks like digging in your heels. It shows up as interrupting, raising your voice, bringing up old mistakes just to prove leverage. Pride demands the last word. But when both people demand the last word, the conversation never ends. It becomes a tug of war where neither side wins, and the rope burns everyone's hands. Peace, on the other hand, looks like letting go of that rope. It means saying, "This relationship is more important than me proving I'm right in this moment." That choice de-escalates. It lowers walls. It clears space for real resolution. Peace is not passive. It's not silence out of fear, and it's not stuffing down your feelings. It's an active decision to protect the bond even while addressing the issue. Choosing peace means you communicate differently. You speak calmly. You use words that build bridges instead of walls. You remind yourself that the person in front of you is not your enemy. They are someone you care about. The problem is the enemy, not the person. With that perspective, you can attack the problem together rather than attacking each other. In practical terms, choosing peace often looks like walking away for a few minutes to cool down. It might be lowering your voice when you feel it rising. It might be saying, I need some time to think before I respond. These small choices create breathing room where pride would normally fuel the fire. When you step away or soften your tone, you aren't avoiding the issue. You're protecting the relationship while you figure out how to solve it. There is strength in this restraint. Pride feels powerful in the moment, but it leaves damage in its wake. Peace may feel quiet, but it builds trust that lasts. Your partner, your colleague, your family member, they remember when you chose not to escalate, when you valued them more than the argument. Over time, that trust makes conflicts shorter, softer, and easier to resolve. Think of how many relationships have ended not because of one big disagreement, but because of the constant need to be right. Pride stacks brick upon brick until walls are built so high that connection is lost. Peace does the opposite. It removes bricks. It keeps the pathway open, even when you disagree. Protecting that pathway is how connection survives conflict. It also helps to ask yourself in the middle of a fight, what do I want most right now? Do I want to win this argument, or do I want us to be okay? That question alone can shift your perspective. Winning the argument may satisfy pride for a moment, but being okay together satisfies the relationship long after. Pride feeds the ego, peace feeds the bond. And in the end, only one of those truly matters if you want the relationship to last. Peace requires humility. It's the willingness to admit when you're wrong, to apologize when you've hurt someone, to step back when you realize the words coming out of your mouth are fueled more by ego than truth. Apologizing doesn't shrink you, it strengthens the relationship. Owning your part doesn't diminish you, it shows maturity and respect. Pride resists these moves, but peace embraces them. Choosing peace doesn't mean you never get to express your opinion. It means you express it in a way that serves the relationship instead of serving your ego. You can stand firm in your values while still being gentle in your delivery. You can disagree without being disagreeable. Peace doesn't cancel your voice, it amplifies it because it makes the other person more willing to listen.